What if I told you that airports across America, once packed with travelers chasing dreams, are now echoing with emptiness? Picture terminals where families used to rush towards security gates, now sitting dark and abandoned. Runways built for hundreds of daily flights now see a handful per week. From the heartland to the coasts, state airports that once symbolized local pride and connection are crumbling into ghost towns. International tourists have stopped coming. Even Americans are bypassing these hubs entirely. But why is this happening? Is it about money, convenience, or something darker about how America's smaller cities are being left behind? Stay with me, because the last airport on this list was once called the gateway to natural wonder. Now, locals say it's the loneliest place in their state. In today's countdown, we're revealing the 9 U.S. state airports where the collapse has already begun. Number 9. Harrisburg International Airport, Pennsylvania. When the capital can't compete. If you thought a state capital would guarantee a thriving airport, think again. Harrisburg International Airport in Pennsylvania tells a different story. This facility, serving the capital region and central Pennsylvania, has seen passenger traffic collapse by over 48% compared to 2019 levels. For an airport that once handled nearly 2 million passengers annually, the decline is staggering. Today, walking through MDT feels like stepping into a time capsule where the clock stopped, but nobody bothered to wind it back up. The numbers paint a grim picture. Direct flights that once connected Harrisburg to major hubs like Atlanta, Chicago, and Charlotte have been slashed or eliminated entirely. Airlines, including American, Delta, and United, have cut service so drastically that travelers now face a brutal choice. Drive 2 hours east to Philadelphia, 90 minutes south to Baltimore, or settle for expensive connecting flights through cities they could have reached directly just 5 years ago. For business travelers, the inconvenience is maddening. For families trying to visit relatives or take vacations, it's exhausting. Why has Harrisburg fallen so hard? Start with proximity. The airport sits in an awkward geographic position, sandwiched between massive hubs in Philadelphia, Baltimore, and even Newark. When airlines trimmed routes during the pandemic, smaller markets like Harrisburg were the first to be sacrificed. But the bleeding didn't stop when travel resumed. Even as other airports bounced back, Harrisburg kept losing flights. By 2025, the airport operates at barely half its pre-pandemic capacity, and there's no recovery plan in sight. The fallout is brutal for locals. A retired teacher from Mechanicsburg described her recent travel nightmare. She wanted to visit her daughter in Denver, but faced a choice between a 6-hour drive to Philadelphia or a 2-stop flight through Charlotte and Dallas that took 11 hours. She ended up driving, cursing the entire way. That's the reality for thousands of central Pennsylvanians who once took Harrisburg's airport for granted. But it's not just inconvenience. The economic impact ripples outward. Fewer flights mean fewer rental car bookings, less demand for airport hotels, and declining revenues for restaurants and shops inside the terminal. Workers have been laid off. Concessions have closed. Even the parking lots, once reliably full, now sit half empty on most days. And here's the cruel irony. Harrisburg sits in a state with one of America's busiest airports, Philadelphia International. But for residents 2 hours west, that proximity feels more like abandonment than convenience. They watch as billions pour into PHL's expansion, while their own airport withers. The message is clear. In modern America, if you're not a major hub, you're on your own. So if Pennsylvania's capital can't sustain an airport, what does that mean for smaller markets across the country? The answer is playing out in real time at our next stop, where another state capital is watching its airport fade into irrelevance. Number 8. Des Moines International Airport, Iowa. The heartland's broken promise. Picture this. You're in Des Moines, the largest city in Iowa, the state capital, and a metro area of over 600,000 people. Logic says the airport should be thriving, but walk through Des Moines International today, and you'll find something unsettling. Gates sitting unused, concourses that feel too big for the handful of travelers passing through, and a schedule board showing fewer and fewer direct flights every season. Passenger traffic at DSM has dropped by 39% compared to 2019, a decline that stunned local officials who believed Iowa's heartland appeal would insulate it from the coastal aviation collapse. They were wrong. By 2025, the airport struggles to offer direct service to even a dozen cities, forcing Iowans into the same exhausting pattern. Drive to Chicago or Minneapolis, or accept multi-stop itineraries that turn a simple trip into an all-day ordeal. What went wrong? Start with demographics. Iowa's population growth has been nearly flat for 2 decades, and young people continue leaving for opportunities in larger metros. Without population growth, there's no expanding customer base to justify new routes. Airlines look at load factors, the percentage of seats filled on each flight, and when those numbers sag, routes get axed. Des Moines has been hemorrhaging routes since 2020, and the bleeding hasn't stopped. Then, there's competition from nearby hubs. Minneapolis and Chicago offer vastly more options, better connections, and often cheaper fares due to economies of scale. For Des Moines residents, it's often worth the 3-hour drive to reach O'Hare or MSP. That rational choice by travelers becomes a death spiral for DSM. The economic consequences are painful. Iowa markets itself as a business-friendly state, but without a functional airport, attracting corporate headquarters, or hosting major conferences becomes nearly impossible. Executives aren't going to relocate to a city where flying anywhere requires connections. The insurance and finance sectors, which employ thousands in Des Moines, rely on air travel for client meetings and industry events. When flights disappear, so does business agility. Locals feel the sting personally. A software developer in West Des Moines recounted booking a trip to Seattle for a tech conference. The cheapest option? A layover in Denver that added 6 hours to his journey. The alternative was driving 4 hours to Minneapolis and flying direct. He chose the drive, but the lost productivity and exhaustion made him question whether staying in Iowa was worth it. And here's the brutal truth. Des Moines isn't unique. Across the Midwest, state capitals and mid-sized cities are watching their airports shrink while mega-hubs in Dallas, Denver, and Atlanta grow larger and more dominant. The hub and spoke model, once meant to connect America, is now concentrating aviation into a handful of fortress cities, while everyone else gets left behind. But if Des Moines feels forgotten, wait until you hear about the next airport on our list, a place where natural beauty once drew millions, but now can't convince airlines to land there anymore. Number 7. Boise Airport, Idaho, when paradise becomes inaccessible. For years, Boise was the great American success story, a vibrant, growing city in a stunning mountain landscape, attracting young families, retirees, and tech workers fleeing California's high costs. The airport, BOI, seemed bulletproof. Passenger numbers climbed year after year, as Idaho became one of the fastest-growing states in the nation. But 2025 tells a very different story. Despite Idaho's population boom, Boise Airport has seen flight cancellations and route reductions that shocked locals. Southwest Airlines, once a major player at BOI, slashed multiple routes. Alaska Airlines cut frequencies. Even Delta trimmed back service. The result is an airport that feels oddly quiet for a city that's supposedly thriving. Why the disconnect? The answer is capacity constraints and infrastructure limits. Boise Airport, despite expansions, simply can't handle the volume needed to support Idaho's growth. The single runway and limited gate space create bottlenecks, and airlines hate bottlenecks. When an airport can't guarantee quick turnarounds and reliable schedules, carriers move capacity elsewhere. Then there's the cost structure. Flying into Boise has become noticeably more expensive. Airfares from BOI to major cities often run 30 to 50% higher than comparable routes from Salt Lake City, just a 4-hour drive south. For budget-conscious travelers, especially families, that price gap is impossible to ignore. Many Idahoans have started making the drive to SLC, booking cheaper flights and pocketing the savings. The economic impact hits hard. Boise's tech sector, which has attracted companies like Micron and numerous startups, depends on connectivity. Engineers flying to Silicon Valley for meetings, investors visiting from the East Coast, and conferences that bring national attention all require a functional airport. When flight options dwindle and prices spike, Boise's competitive advantage erodes. Tourism suffers even more. Idaho markets itself as an outdoor paradise, skiing in Sun Valley, rafting in the Salmon River, hiking in the Sawtooth Mountains. But when getting to Boise requires layovers and premium fares, tourists choose Colorado, Utah, or Montana instead. Hotels in Sun Valley report declining out-of-state bookings. Ski resorts see fewer visitors. And here's the kicker. Boise's struggles highlight a cruel paradox. Growth doesn't guarantee airport success. Without the infrastructure to support expansion, and without airlines willing to invest in smaller markets, even booming cities can watch their airports wither. If Boise, one of America's fastest-growing metros, can't sustain robust air service, what hope do truly small markets have? Which brings us to our next stop, a state capital where the airport's collapse is so severe that even locals joke it would be faster to drive to a neighboring state than deal with their own hub. Number 6. Providence Airport, Rhode Island, the forgotten New England gateway. Rhode Island is the smallest state in America, but for decades, it punched above its weight with T.F. Green Airport in Providence. Convenient for both Rhode Islanders and southern Massachusetts residents, PVD offered a practical alternative to the chaos of Boston Logan. Budget carriers like Southwest made Providence a hub for cheap flights, and travelers from across New England flocked here to save money and avoid Boston's traffic nightmares. But in 2025, that glory is fading fast. Passenger traffic at Providence has plummeted by 42% compared to pre-pandemic levels, one of the steepest declines in the Northeast. Southwest, once Providence's anchor tenant, has dramatically reduced service. JetBlue pulled multiple routes. Even legacy carriers like American and Delta offer skeletal schedules. The result is an airport that feels eerily quiet, with entire concourses sitting dark and unused. Why the collapse? Geography is both Providence's strength and its curse. The airport sits just an hour from Boston Logan, and as airlines consolidated routes during the pandemic, they chose to concentrate service at the larger, more profitable hub. For travelers in Rhode Island and southern Massachusetts, the calculation became simple. Drive a bit farther to Boston and get better options, more destinations, and often cheaper fares thanks to competition. The consequences ripple through the local economy. Rental car companies have shuttered locations. Airport hotels operate at dismal occupancy rates. Restaurants and shops inside the terminal have closed, leaving travelers with limited options even when flights do exist. For workers, layoffs have been brutal. Locals feel betrayed. A teacher from Cranston described booking a trip to visit family in Orlando. She checked Providence first, but found only one option, a connection through Charlotte, that added 4 hours to her journey. Frustrated, she looked at Boston Logan and found multiple direct flights at lower prices. She made the drive, cursing the whole way about how her own state's airport had become useless. And here's the painful irony. Rhode Island desperately needs a functional airport to compete economically. The state markets itself as a great place to live and do business, but without convenient air travel, that pitch rings hollow. Companies won't relocate here. Conferences won't be held here. Even tourists, drawn by Newport's charm and Providence's restaurants, increasingly fly into Boston and rent cars rather than deal with PVD's limited service. So if Rhode Island, nestled in the heart of wealthy New England, can't sustain an airport, what does that mean for more remote states? The answer is playing out in real time at our next stop, where geographic isolation has turned an airport into a symbol of abandonment. Number 5. Tulsa International Airport, Oklahoma, when oil money runs dry. Tulsa was once the oil capital of the world, a city where fortunes were made and corporate jets filled the skies. Tulsa International Airport reflected that prosperity, serving as a hub for business travelers, energy executives, and families drawn by Oklahoma's booming economy. But in 2025, the glory days feel like ancient history. Passenger traffic at TOL has dropped by 37% compared to 2019, a decline that mirrors the broader struggles of Tulsa's economy. As the oil and gas industry consolidated and companies relocated headquarters to Houston or Dallas, Tulsa lost its economic engine. The airport, once bustling with business travelers, now feels half empty. Airlines have slashed routes. Direct flights to key markets like New York, Los Angeles, and even Chicago have been reduced or eliminated. Why has Tulsa fallen so hard? Start with economic stagnation. The city's population has barely grown in 2 decades, and job creation lags behind national averages. Without a dynamic economy driving business travel, the airport loses its primary customer base. Then there's competition from Oklahoma City, just 90 minutes southwest. Will Rogers World Airport offers more flights, better connections, and often lower fares. For Tulsans, the math is simple. Drive to OKC and get better service, or settle for limited options and high prices at home. Many choose to drive, accelerating TUL's decline. The consequences are painful for the local economy. Companies considering Tulsa as a location immediately ask about air service. When executives learn they'll face constant connections and travel hassles, they choose Dallas, Austin, or Denver instead. Tulsa's efforts to rebrand as a tech-friendly city founder on the reality that nobody wants to live somewhere flying out feels like punishment. Locals feel the frustration daily. A marketing consultant in Midtown Tulsa described booking a client meeting in Boston. The only option from TUL involved a connection in Dallas with a 3-hour layover. The total journey took 9 hours for a flight that should have been direct. She ended up spending more time in airports than in her actual meeting and vowed never to book through Tulsa again. And here's the tragic irony. Tulsa has culture, history, and a lower cost of living that should make it attractive. But without a functional airport, all those advantages become moot. The city that once symbolized American energy and ambition now feels stranded, watching opportunity fly overhead to bigger markets. Which brings us to our next stop, where a state famous for natural beauty can't convince airlines that tourists actually want to come. Number 4. Portland International Jetport, Maine. When lobster can't lure flights, Maine is iconic. Rocky coastlines, fresh lobster, charming coastal towns, and Acadia National Park draw millions of visitors every year. Portland, the state's largest city, should be a thriving gateway for all that tourism. But walk through Portland International Jetport today, and you'll find a terminal that feels too big for the traffic it handles. Passenger numbers are down 34% compared to pre-pandemic levels, and airlines continue trimming routes despite Maine's tourism appeal. Why can't Portland sustain flights? Geography and seasonality are the culprits. Maine sits in the far northeast corner of the country, making it a difficult and expensive destination for airlines to serve. Flights from major hubs require longer routes, higher fuel costs, and less attractive economics. And because Maine's tourism is heavily seasonal, peaking in summer and fall, airlines can't justify year-round service. Winter flights run half-empty, bleeding money that carriers refuse to tolerate. Then there's competition from Boston Logan, just 2 hours south. For many visitors to Maine, flying into Boston and renting a car makes more sense than dealing with Portland's limited options and higher fares. That rational choice by tourists undermines PWM's viability, creating a vicious cycle. The economic impact is severe. Maine's tourism industry employs over 100,000 people, from hotel workers to restaurant staff to fishing boat captains. When getting to Maine becomes inconvenient, tourists choose Cape Cod, the Outer Banks, or even international destinations like Nova Scotia. Hotels in Portland report declining occupancy. Restaurants see fewer out-of-state customers. Locals feel the pain too. A software engineer in South Portland described trying to fly to a conference in San Francisco. The only option from PWM involved a connection in Newark with a 4-hour layover. The total travel time exceeded 12 hours, and the ticket cost over $900. Frustrated, she looked at driving to Boston, found a direct flight for half the price, and made the 2-hour drive. And here's the cruel truth. Maine's natural beauty should be an asset, but in the airline industry, beauty doesn't pay the bills. Load factors and profit margins do. And when Portland can't deliver either consistently, airlines walk away. So if Maine, with its postcard scenery and loyal tourism base, can't sustain an airport, what hope do truly remote states have? Our next stop answers that question with a collapse so severe, it's become a case study in aviation abandonment. Number 3, Cheyenne Regional Airport, Wyoming, where the frontier feels forgotten. Wyoming is America's least populous state, but for decades, it maintained a network of small airports that connected its remote communities to the rest of the country. Cheyenne Regional Airport, serving the state capital, was never going to rival Denver or Salt Lake City, but it offered something essential, a lifeline for business travelers, government officials, and families who called Wyoming home. In 2025, that lifeline is fraying beyond recognition. Passenger traffic at Cheyenne has collapsed by 53% compared to pre-pandemic levels, leaving the airport struggling to justify its existence. Direct flights are almost non-existent. Most travelers face connections through Denver, just 90 minutes south by car. For many Wyomingites, the calculation is simple. Why bother with the airport when driving to Denver offers vastly better options? The decline isn't just about convenience, it's about economics. Wyoming's economy, heavily dependent on energy extraction, has been battered by the shift away from coal and fluctuating oil prices. Population growth is stagnant, and young people continue leaving for opportunities in Colorado, Texas, or the coasts. Without a growing customer base, airlines see no reason to invest in Cheyenne. For locals, the airport's collapse feels personal. A rancher outside Cheyenne recounted needing to fly to Washington, D.C. for a legislative meeting. The only option from Cheyenne involved 2 connections and nearly 12 hours of travel time. Frustrated, he drove to Denver, parked his truck at DIA, and caught a direct flight. The experience left him wondering why Wyoming even bothers maintaining an airport that serves so few people so poorly. Tourism has suffered too. Wyoming markets itself as a destination for outdoor enthusiasts, Yellowstone, Grand Teton, and world-class fishing and hunting. But getting here is increasingly difficult. Visitors from the East, coast, or international markets face exhausting multi-stop itineraries just to reach Wyoming's small airports. Many choose Montana or Colorado instead, where access is easier and infrastructure more reliable. And here's the brutal truth. For states like Wyoming, aviation isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. The vast distances and sparse population mean that without air service, communities become isolated, business slows, opportunities disappear, young people leave faster because staying feels like accepting disconnection from the modern world. Cheyenne's airport collapse isn't just inconvenient. It's existential. But if Wyoming's isolation explains its struggles, what about states with tourism magnets that should guarantee traffic? Our next stop proves that even natural wonders can't save an airport when economics turn ugly. Number 2, Billings-Logan International Airport, Montana, where Big Sky meets empty gates. Montana calls itself Big Sky Country, a land of vast wilderness, world-class skiing, and Yellowstone National Park sitting at its southern border. Billings, the state's largest city, serves as the eastern gateway to all that natural splendor. Billings-Logan International Airport should be thriving on tourism alone. Instead, it's collapsing. Passenger traffic has dropped by 41% compared to 2019, leaving the terminal feeling more like a regional bus station than an international gateway. Direct flights are rare and expensive. Most travelers face connections through Denver, Salt Lake City, or Minneapolis, turning what should be simple trips into exhausting multi-stop marathons. Airlines have slashed service so aggressively that even Montanans joke it's faster to drive 6 hours to Denver Then deal with their own airport. Why has Billings fallen so hard? Start with population. Montana has just over 1 million residents spread across the fourth largest state in the country. Billings itself barely cracks 100,000 people. Without a dense population base, airlines struggle to fill seats. Seasonal tourism helps, but it's not enough to sustain year-round service. Then there's infrastructure. Billings-Logan, despite its grand name, lacks the facilities to handle larger aircraft or significant passenger volumes. Airlines that might consider Montana routes take one look at the limitations and invest elsewhere. The airport needs expansion, but Montana lacks the tax base to fund major projects. The state is caught in a trap, can't attract flights without better infrastructure, can't build infrastructure without more passengers. The economic consequences are devastating. Montana markets itself as the last best place, a destination for outdoor enthusiasts and second home buyers fleeing crowded coastal cities. But when getting here requires expensive flights and exhausting connections, many potential visitors choose Jackson Hole, Aspen, or Park City instead. Hotels in Billings report declining occupancy. Ski, WEP, resorts near Big Sky struggle to attract out-of-state guests. Even Yellowstone sees fewer visitors entering through Montana's eastern gates. Locals are furious. A teacher in Billings recounted trying to visit family in Philadelphia. The cheapest option involved a connection in Denver with a 5-hour layover, followed by another connection in Chicago. Total travel time exceeded 15 hours for a trip that should take 5. She ended up driving to Denver, parking her car for a week, and flying direct. And here's the tragic irony. Montana has everything tourists want: stunning landscapes, wildlife, outdoor recreation, and authentic Western culture. But the state's remote location and sparse population mean airlines see it as a money-losing proposition. So Montana sits, blessed with natural wealth, but cursed by geographic isolation, watching its airport connections disappear one route at a time. Which brings us to our final stop. The airport that locals say symbolizes everything wrong. With America's aviation collapse, a place where history, tourism, and economic decline converge into a story so bleak, it's become a warning for every small market airport in the country. Number 1. Charleston-Yeager Airport, West Virginia, where coal country lost its wings. If any airport symbolizes the collapse of small market aviation in America, it's Charleston-Yeager in West Virginia. Named after the legendary test pilot, Chuck Yeager, a native son, this airport once served a region built on coal money and industrial might. But in 2025, the coal is gone, the industry is dead, and the airport is dying with it. Passenger traffic at CRW has plummeted by 51%. Compared to pre-pandemic levels, one of the steepest declines in the entire country. Walk through the terminal, and you'll find more closed gates than open ones. Shops have shuttered. Restaurants operate on skeleton crews. The few travelers passing through move quietly, almost apologetically, as if embarrassed to be using an airport that feels abandoned. Direct flights are nearly extinct. Charleston once connected directly to major hubs like Atlanta, Charlotte, and Chicago. Today, most of those routes are gone, replaced by skeletal schedules that force travelers into exhausting connections. Want to fly to New York? Prepare for a layover in Charlotte. Heading to the West Coast? You'll connect twice, minimum. For West Virginians, flying anywhere has become an exercise in frustration. Why the collapse? The answer is economic devastation. West Virginia's coal industry, which once employed hundreds of thousands and generated billions in revenue, has been gutted by market forces, environmental regulations, and the shift to natural gas and renewables. As mines closed and jobs disappeared, people left. West Virginia is one of only 2 states losing population, and the exodus continues. Without people, there's no demand for flights. Then there's poverty. West Virginia has one of the lowest median household incomes in the nation. For families struggling to pay bills, air travel is a luxury they can't afford. Even when flights exist, they sit half empty because locals would rather drive 6 hours to Charlotte or Columbus than pay premium fares for limited service. Airlines see those load factors and pull routes, accelerating the decline. The geographic challenges compound everything. Charleston sits in a valley surrounded by mountains, making approaches difficult and limiting expansion options. The airport can't handle larger aircraft, and weather delays are common. Airlines hate unpredictability, and CRW offers it in spades. The consequences extend far beyond inconvenience. West Virginia is trying desperately to diversify its economy, attracting tech companies, remote workers, and tourism. But every pitch founders on the same obstacle: the airport. Companies won't relocate here. Remote workers won't move here. Even tourists, drawn by whitewater rafting and mountain scenery, choose neighboring states with better access. Locals feel abandoned. A nurse in Charleston described her recent attempt to visit her daughter in Denver. The only option from CRW was a connection through Charlotte with a 4-hour layover, followed by another leg to Denver. Total travel time exceeded 11 hours. Frustrated, she looked at driving to Columbus, found a direct flight for $200 less, and spent 6 hours on the highway instead. She hasn't flown out of Charleston since. Even efforts to save the airport have failed. State officials offered incentives to airlines, begging them to restore routes. Airlines took the money, operated minimal service for the required period, then pulled out the moment subsidies ended. The message was clear: West Virginia isn't worth serving, even with government handouts. And here's the most heartbreaking part. Chuck Yeager, the man this airport honors, broke the sound barrier and symbolized American innovation and courage. But the airport named for him now symbolizes the opposite: decline, abandonment, and a region left behind by forces beyond its control. When the coal ran out, so did West Virginia's future. And the empty gates at Charleston Yeager are the proof. So here we are, from Harrisburg to Charleston, from Providence to Billings, America's smaller airports are collapsing. It's not just about lost flights. It's about communities cut off from opportunity, economies unable to compete, and a country where geographic inequality grows wider every year. The hub and spoke model has concentrated aviation into a handful of fortress cities, while everyone else gets left behind. And until something changes, more airports will join this list, more gates will sit dark, and more Americans will feel the sting of disconnection. What do you think? Have you experienced these struggling airports? Are they worth saving? Or is this just the new reality? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if this opened your eyes, hit subscribe, because we're not done exposing the stories mainstream media won't touch.